Robust and powerful, endowed with a long and thick fleece, a very developed heart and lungs, the yak is built to survive the high altitudes of the Tibetan plateau. In this immense region north of the Himalayas, human populations began to domesticate it more than 7,000 years ago. They made it a major ally for surviving in these cold and hostile environments, settling there despite the difficult living conditions. "18 million years ago, a small, discreet, and solitary mammal lived in the forests of Eurasia. From Europe to present-day Pakistan, it liked to graze in the humid clearings and the marshes at the edge of the woods. The animal looked like the smaller antelopes of today. This small horned beast is called Eotragus. It is the common ancestor of a now famous family, the Bovidae. The populations of this mysterious creature evolved over time to adapt to different natural environments around the world. 5 to 10 million years ago, they gave birth to about 20 species, including the mighty aurochs. Man chooses some of them to domesticate them, and then links his destiny to this incredible animal family. This is how zebu, yak, water buffalo, and ox came into being. The Changtang Plateau in the Ladakh region in the far north of India is a small section of the immense Tibetan Plateau. This is where the Changpas live, one of the rare nomadic yak-herding peoples who still move from village to village according to the seasons. Karnak, at 1,500 feet above sea level, is one of the 6 stopover points of their unchanging journey. "17 families live here in the spring for a few months with their 300 yaks, which are everything to them. These last nomadic Changpas raise their yaks in conditions very similar to those of their ancestors. The animals sleep in stone enclosures, which are an integral part of the Changpas' habitat. Somo and her family live here in a small traditional house. It would be very difficult for us to survive without the yak. They provide us with everything we need, and raising yaks does not cost us anything. For raising sheep and goats, we need shepherds every day for grazing, but we don't need shepherds for the female yaks. She goes to the pasture early in the morning and returns home in the evening by herself. It's hard to imagine life without the yak. Without the yak, we wouldn't have milk, butter, cheese, or manure for heating and cooking. Female yaks, the Dri, are very docile. They are smart and friendly. They are very easy to handle, especially for milking. When the yaks have gone to graze in the morning, we collect the dung in the yak shed. We also collect dung from nearby mountains and pastures. The yak dung is kept on the roof to be dried. We use this dry dung for cooking food, especially local bread called kambir. Part of this dry dung is stored for the winter. Every evening, the female yaks return to the village on their own after having wandered in the surrounding pastures. Our ancestors and their cattle settled in this village hundreds of years ago, after seeing the abundance of water and grazing lands in these valleys. We continued to change locations depending on the quality of the pastures and the quantity of water. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for us to survive. These pastures are the lifeline of all nomads. In spring, anticipating the first warm days before they lose their thick woolen fleece, the male yaks are driven back to the village and welcomed by the community. These large, powerful, and resistant males with a fiery character live away from the herd throughout the year. Alone at the foot of the glaciers, at nearly 1,900 feet above sea level, they face extreme cold and predators, Tibetan wolves and snow leopards. The remains of those who did not survive are brought back from the high altitudes by the men. The pairs of horns, like important relics, are placed on sacred altars called mani, as offerings to the mountain spirits and in homage to the yaks. The guardian figure of the yak is placed at the center of the village, holding an important place in the people's lives and beliefs. Small figurines made of powdered yak bone are burned at the village's Buddhist temple, while the tails are placed atop poles like banners, stretching toward the sky to protect the community. Angchuk, a member of the village council, monitors with his peers the respect of these traditions.
Special prayers are organized for the yak in the monasteries. These prayers are meant to protect the yak from diseases, bad omens, and from the evil eye. Prayers are also made to bring rain, snowfall, and good pasture grasses.
Like all Changpas, Tsomo is preparing to harvest the famous woolly fibers with exceptional qualities, which yaks naturally lose at this time of year. The males remain wild in nature, so it is very difficult to tie them up and harvest their wool. It sometimes takes 4 or 5 of us to subdue a male yak. After the yaks have been tied up, the men take the undercoat called kulu and give it to women in the community. Like Tsomo and Angchuk, men and women whisper and hum in the ear of the huge yaks to calm them. The underbelly yak wool is used to make textile products, while its fur, called sitpa, is better for making rope and a waterproof fabric. These materials are an integral part of the Changpas' daily life. Village women spin the wool to make traditional dresses, local rugs, and blankets. Like its wool, yak leather is central to Changpa culture. It is used to make traditional clothes and shoes, and sometimes even enclosures, doors, or roof patches. Particularly thick, it must be softened to be worked. Once cleaned and scraped, the skins are left to dry. Then the rigid leather is beaten and worked by hand, with repeated movements to heat it and to give it the desired shape. A few hundred sheep and 2,000 cashmere goats, as hardy as the yaks, complete the Changpa livestock, and also provide them with high-quality skins and wool. Like the yaks, the goats and sheep come back from the pasture every evening to spend the night with the Changpas under the supervision of the Himalayan shepherd. These cattle have so far adapted to changes in the climate and the Changpas' way of life. But for elders like Angchuk, the very real risk of the yak disappearing is a bad omen.
Yaks are present in many parts of the world, and their numbers are constantly decreasing, which is not a good thing. If the yak disappears, we highland nomads will lose everything. How will we make our special local clothes, our tents, our mats? In the future, we will miss many things. So before that happens, I want to tell all of my fellow herders to educate their children, not to abandon the yaks, to protect our yak, to maintain our ancestral tradition and culture. I don't want to think about the day when the future generation will not know anything about this animal. It's Kulu, it's Sukdan, it's Gonsha. They won't know anything about the yak's many products.
The yak is both a mystical figure and a provider of vital resources for the nomadic community. And its wool is an essential element for the survival of the Changpas in these harsh and austere living conditions. With its long and thick wool, which protects it from the cold like a heavy cape, the yak attracts the attention of the ancient populations of the Tibetan plateau. They undertake to tame it, then to domesticate it, and thus adopt a companion who supplies materials, but who is also ideal for facing the harsh mountain conditions alongside them. Thanks to its formidable walking and carrying abilities, they explore new high-altitude territories together. It is estimated that the period of yak domestication began in the Neolithic period, around 7,500 years ago. And it is in the narrow gorges of the upper Indus Valley that the oldest known engravings evoking the interaction between our two species are now visible. These 4,000-year-old rock sites, perched at 1,300 feet above sea level, would also be the highest in the world. Feroz Dinchek, veterinarian and geneticist, works for the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. In charge of monitoring the health of herds in the region, he also wonders about the origins of the relationship between man and yak.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful petroclips. You can see 3 yaks, wild yaks, I think most probably, because few people are hunting it, one small, medium, and one large one. There you can see clearly a dog also, 3 person with bow and arrow. So this depicts that there were also wild yaks, which people used to hunt during these times. This is the tail. This is one person behind the yak. This is the tail of the yak, then 4 legs. One person is riding on the yak. Then this is the head of the yak with very prominent horns, and one person is pulling, and another person is also pulling. You can see 2 persons pulling the yak. So it's a very nice picture.
So in the Bronze Age, two practices seemed to coexist. Men continued to hunt the wild yak, while living with its domesticated descendant on a daily basis. These inscriptions testify to the importance of the yak for the ancient settlements at the top of the world. Today, there are only a few thousand wild yaks left. They all live in the most remote valleys of the Tibetan Plateau. Generally black in color, they are much larger, bulkier, and leggy than their domesticated descendants. The males, who can be aggressive, measure up to 6.5 feet at the withers and can weigh almost 2,600 pounds. Still close to its ancestor, the wild yak, the domesticated yak lives in the same geographical space and is often subject to natural selection. Feroz Dinshek regularly visits the herders to ensure the good health of their yaks. Around the large saline lakes of Changtong, such as Sokar, herds of yaks gather to enjoy the abundant grasslands. They are Ladakhis, one of 20 known breeds of domestic yaks.
Yak has been related to Ladakhis since for thousands of years. So the ancestors of this domestic yaks comes from the wild yak, which we call it as Bos mutus. Through them, the human beings have started domesticating it, and presently what we are seeing is Bos gruniens. It has a special ability to thrive in hypoxic condition in very extreme temperatures, and it can survive very scanty grasses. It can survive eating snows and ice in winter. These animals, they have 2 coats of fiber. One is undercoat, which is, we call it as khulu, and the outer coat, which we call it as hair. We can see that this yak have a very wide thorax with a huge air capacity. Their lungs are very big so that they can consume more air. When the animal started living with the people, they prefer low altitude with more oxygen, so their chest capacity has reduced. Scientists have found that they have special genes like melatonin gene, which helps in more oxygen carrying capacity of this yak, which helps them to adapt in this hypoxic and cold arid conditions of Himalayas and Tibetan plateaus. This domestic yak, they are more docile because people have tamed it, but still the male part of this semi-domestic yak is very difficult to control.
During the millennia following its domestication, the yak accompanies the people in their migrations. In Mongolia via the Altai chain, as far as India with the Great Mughals, and in Central Asia, which sees the development of the Turkic people, and also in Afghanistan. For the materials it provides, but also thanks to its qualities as a walker, the yak shines throughout Inner Asia's high altitudes along the mythical trade routes, the Salt Road, the Tea Road, and of course, the Silk Road. The yak has thus accompanied and perhaps even favored exchanges between human populations and their access to new territories. But in the 20th century, mechanization pushed it out of commercial transport, ringing the death knell of caravans. This climber of high passes and tireless carrier has today been replaced by trucks, and yak-herding people have become rare. In the eastern Himalayas, we encounter one of these peoples. The Monpas live in northeast India, Bhutan, and southern Tibet. They adopted the yak 2 millennia ago, and the yak remains a true pillar of their culture and traditions. The Monpas celebrate the yak through a show that perpetuates its symbolic place in their culture. The yak dance marks the high points of the year, such as the departure of the Brogpas and their yaks for the spring transhumance.
My name is Nilmat Sering. I'm from Lubrong, and I am a Brogpas. Yak herders are called Brogpas. People without yaks are not Brogpas. Brogpas have no other means of subsistence than the yak. Our dance comes from the heart. This yak dance makes us feel in touch with the yak. Doing the yak dance protects us from death. This is good for the development of the village and our community. That's why I love to dance. I like to show our culture. The yak dance comes from our devotion. We have a vision for the village. Doing the dance is like offering prayers to God.
This is how they celebrate the peace and prosperity that the animal symbolizes. Inviting it to dance among the people is meant to bring a blessing to their community and to the great journey ahead for the Brogpas and their yaks. Sering is a 66-year-old Monpas who lives with his family in the heart of a small village. With his wife and their 2 children, They raise on their wooden farm around 50 cattle that they are preparing to move to summer pastures.
I have 37 yaks, males and females, as well as 16 hybrids, crosses between yak and cow. The yaks are veritable horns of plenty. All of our clothing from head to toe comes from the yak, along with the butter and cheese. We are very grateful to our father and mother, but the yaks feed us better than our parents.
A few hours before departure, and like every day of the year, Tsering and his wife make yak milk products that are the staples of the Monpas table. Part of the churpi, yak cheese, is sold to meet other household needs. From the cream, they obtain the very popular yak butter, which can be warmed up in a butter tea. For everyone in the home, the observation is the same. Milk production has dropped due to the increase in temperatures, which are not suitable for yaks. On this evening in May, like every year, Tsering's family is ready for the spring transhumance. It will take them to the mountain pasture of Broktsy, 3,200 feet higher at nearly 1,300 feet above sea level on the border with Bhutan. On the morning of the departure, the yaks, who have sensed the time has come, get strength by filling up on soaked cereals. There is a peaceful and solemn atmosphere. Tsering's wife bows down in veneration of the Buddha and his Dharma teaching.
When we move our herds, we perform rites of offerings, such as one for luck or one for fertility. On the morning of the departure, before loading the yaks and hybrids, we burn incense. We must pray to all of the deities and Dharma protectors. We pray to all of the deities and Dharma protectors for the welfare of the livestock and humans, so that they are protected from all harm and injury along the route, and all their wishes will be granted. We never know how long we'll be out on the pastures. A sufficient quantity of products like flour, rice, salt, chilies, and even tea leaves are loaded onto the yaks.
The joined lives of the Monpas and their yaks has long been punctuated by this vital transhumance. During summer, the yaks take advantage of the mountain pasture's benefits, cooler temperatures and richer pastures. In return, they offer the community all the elements necessary for its survival. But the young Monpas accept less and less to adopt this life made of constraints and sacrifices. And rising temperatures, which requires a transhumance that is always longer, is hurting this age-old pastoral tradition.
Nowadays, the migration between Bratski and Lebrong is very short and easy. It only takes 1 day. Previously, our transhumance lasted 12 to 13 days with difficulties. Rain, snow, no tarpaulin, no tent. We had to sleep under a rock or under a tree. There used to be a lot of precipitation going up in the spring and a lot of snowfall going down in the fall. Sometimes our provisions ran out on the way, so we had to deal with hunger and thirst. The decrease in the number of yaks is due to the lack of grass and water on the pastures because of global warming. For these reasons, the number of brokpas going to higher altitudes is decreasing, as is the number of yaks.
In India, the total population of yaks has gone from 77,000 heads to 58,000 in less than 10 years. And breeders are using more crosses between yaks and cows because these animals, which are more resistant to heat, are less dependent on these transhumances.
Before, there were fewer hybrids. But today, crosses have increased because they bring in more money than yaks. Yaks are adapted to the cold. They have to be taken to high altitudes, but our children refuse to live in these conditions. Now no one wants to climb higher. The children are all at school in the valley, and when we are dead, the yaks will die too. I still hope our children will take care of the yaks after they finish school.
Tenzin, the son of Tsering, came for the occasion to lend a hand to his father, a moment he always looks forward to.
When I was little, I liked to follow my father, just walking behind him. My father taught me how to take care of the herd, how to call them with different calls. Everything is interesting. Walking from one place to another, climbing mountains, going to new different places, seeing new things, walking with the cattle, and my own family walking with me. It's what I love about this trip. My parents send me to school to study and to get a job elsewhere. So I don't want to disappoint them. So I'll find a job. But I see my father who's been doing this forever. And the cattle have grown. So now I think I want to continue here. As we have a yak farm, I plan to continue it.
The survival of yaks in these mountains now depends on the self-sacrifice of these last families of brokpas to raise them at all costs, as if it was about their own survival. In today's changing world, how can we reinvent the destiny of the yak? Far from tradition, the Indian government has established the National Yak Research Center in Arunachal. Mihir Sarkar, the director, knows perfectly well the reasons for the decline of the bovid, and he is seeking solutions to save the yak in India.
The first thing is the transhumance system of yak management and the hardship associated with it to the yak rearers for the hostile geoclimatic conditions. So what we did to curb this problem, we maintain yak in our farm through sedentary system. That means we keep our yak round the year in a particular location without up and down migrations. We believe this will be the future approach model of yak husbandry in our country, and which is sufficient to attract young generations for the profitable yak husbandry. We believe that this will curtail the hardships which the young generation don't want to take.
They are betting on yaks whose characteristics are better adapted to this new farming method. Among the local yak population, males are selected which show resistance to warmer temperatures and whose offspring will have a good chance of withstanding summers without migration to higher altitudes. Their lineage will be followed over several generations to confirm the hopes placed in it.
Second problem behind the decline is the inferior quality of germplasm, which leads to poor productivity and profitability. We have started molecular genetic characterization of yak, and we have set up one elite yak herd bull having superior breeding values. We train them for semen collection, then we process those semens, cryopreserve, and make cryopreserved semen straw for artificial insemination of yaks. And those cryopreserved straws, we use it in our farm, and we also distribute those yak straws to other yak pockets in our country. We believe that this will curb the inbreeding problem, what the farmers do faulty in managing their yaks, because they use the same bulls year after year for breeding their females. We have developed tools for prophylaxis, diagnosis, and treatment for the vulnerable bacterial, viral, and parasitic diseases of yak. One of the foremost reasons why the yak population is declining is the poor economic incentive to the yak rearers. So our aim is, if we can increase the demand of the yak products, then there will be demand for supply, and so the yak farmers will be ultimately benefited. For example, yak produces two types of hairs: outer coarse hair and inner very fine wool, and outer coarse hair is generally waste. But we have developed technologies to evaluate this outer coarse hair by blending with jute and sheep wool. And we have estimated that this technology alone can improve the economy of yak farmers by 10 times.
Breeding peoples have always selected particular characteristics in yaks, leading to the appearance of different breeds. But in a changing world, the new temptation to create a standardized animal brings a risk. That of seeing the disappearance of the yak's unique qualities shaped by millennia of slow and profound adaptation. As global warming intensifies and lifestyles evolve, the yak's future is uncertain. The Indian vision of its future is, however, not the least enviable. In China, Yak breeding is now intended to satisfy a growing demand for meat. So, on their continent of origin, the wandering yak is losing its sacred aura and its link with our species. It is in Switzerland, where you wouldn't expect it, that the yak seems to find new followers who are more respectful of all that it embodies. Long confined to its area of Asian origin, the yak is now trying its luck on new colder highlands in North America or Europe. In the Alps, Rosa Leblanc, yak breeder and caravaner, lives with her herd on her small White Yak farm, perched at an altitude of 6,000 feet in the Val d'Erens. By spending time with bovids and observing them from every angle, she came to understand the animal's potential. For Rosala, living this mutual adaptation is a bit like going back to the origin of domestication of the yak, as the animal has retained a complex personality and a strong wild instinct. I always find it interesting to observe the effect of co-domestication between the animal and the original peoples who lived together. And the yak, I would say, is like the Tibetans. It has the calm side of Buddhism and meditation, and it also has the explosive side of a warrior and a bandit. And living with it after 14 years, you become a bit like that too. And it suits me very well. I can be very calm, but I can be quite explosive too, so I identify with them a lot. For a long time, the rare yaks outside their native lands were in zoos, far from the altitudes or the cool temperatures necessary for them. Back in the mountains, they gradually regain their original functions. What is interesting with the yak in Switzerland is that they live on the steep slopes and the mountain pastures where our local cows no longer go. That's because we developed them and pushed them to be bigger, heavier, to provide higher yields. So now they're too heavy to go up onto the steep slopes where they used to graze. So we have no more local breeds that can inhabit these places. And we have to find another beast, another possibility, to take advantage of this land. It is also an animal which does not need much care. It's very hardy, very easy to keep in a free stall outside. This can be interesting for part-time farmers who do it on the side. Maybe it's people who have taken over a small farm from their parents and who want to keep it going while doing something else. Kubilai is my first yak. It all started with Kubilai when I saw a classified ad. And I was told that it was a wild animal, that I shouldn't take it, it was dangerous. But right away, I had a special relationship with him. Somehow, he brought the yaks here. He led the herd. He established it down here. It was his role to create the herd. And now he is old. He has changed a lot. He is very calm compared to the beginning. He is the beginning of my relationship with the yak. He's my first master. In the sense that I never read much about yaks, explanations of how it worked. I had to observe them. I am obliged to read them, to decipher their language, to understand them. When there were physical problems, we realized that often we didn't know how to treat them here. And that's when I started with the touch, to see if I could help them. And I realized that it was a means of communication for the animals. For once, I'm not asking them to move or to do something. We're just feeling. They can answer. They can say if they like it or if they don't like it. He has moments of deep relaxation when he falls asleep with me next to him. Though my first yaks, I couldn't approach them. But I never force it. I leave them be. And the youngest comes to me. He's the first yak that really comes to me in this game. It's very cute. At an altitude of 16,500 feet in the Himalayas and at 6,500 feet in Switzerland, it is by walking that the relationship between the man or woman and the yak is fully expressed. Whether hiking, trekking, or caravanning, they must be in total complicity so that foot and hoof regulate their step. Traveling with the yaks is perhaps one of the strongest moments we live with the herd. To run with them when the herd follows me are absolutely magical moments of wild strength. It awakens a force in us too. We become a yak for a moment. And it's luminous for me. It's magnificent. It's a sharing, a belonging, tapping into our wild energy that we carry but rarely use in our society. To communicate, I have to sit in the herd. I have to earn my place as a leader by leading them where there is grass, water, by making choices that are reasonable for them, that are not dangerous for them. I think they really watch if I make smart choices. It has become a partnership where they can contribute their knowledge. They find passages through difficult terrain, off-road. They are so much better at this than us. Sometimes their perception of the territory is perfect, though I do not understand it. Yet I know they are right, based on their senses and their understanding. The fact that the yaks are here in Switzerland, it brings something to us. We humans adapt first, and we reveal the wild and gentle aspects of ourselves. The yak will take much longer to adapt to us. On the Tibetan plateau where it comes from, across the entire Himalayan arc that it has conquered alongside us, and elsewhere where it tries to accompany us, the yak remains a sizable ally for human societies. But at a time of climatic and social upheavals, the yak must again show resistance and adaptation to survive. If it succeeds, with or without our help, it will continue to be an irreplaceable guide and companion for us, between the summits and high plateaus, on the heights, as well as on the slopes.